a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101 on a Monday evening. I want to welcome everyone wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from Guyana or you're joining us from our wider Caribbean. If you're joining us from the United States of America, welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to all of you who are joining us from Europe, in the United Kingdom. Lots of our people are there. I would like to welcome all of you who are joining us from Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, in Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, St. Martin. All of you are joining us from French Guiana or Suriname. Welcome to Politics 101. If you're joining us from further afield, good evening, good night, good afternoon, lovely people on the West Coast of the United States of America. And a particular shout out to the people of Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, where I spent the weekend. Went there for my niece's graduation, the latest to graduate with a master's degree from the Heinz clan. My niece Zara, would like to congratulate her, and we had a lovely time. Met up with lots of family and friends. Saturday night I took a walk out to a function they had there in Maryland. Met old friends, new friends, so many of you. If I begin to call the names, I'll get into trouble, but it was nice catching up with persons there. I lived in that area for 12 years and more. And so lots of friends, and of course my relatives, and they're all there. And it was so nice. So many of you who told me that you tune in to Politics 101, and of course our sister program in the morning, the Guyanese Morning Time with Brother Kedaki. Well wishers. I want to thank all of you for the support and the encouragement and the warning about how dangerous our country has become. People are glad to know that some of us are doing the kind of work that we are doing, but they're so fearful for our lives. I mean, our country has now become known for dangerous things that political activists are not free to speak as they should. It's so sad. But quite apart from that, it was so nice, so wonderful to meet up with all the friends, and of course, the ladies who complained that at between 7 and 8:30 in the evening, they can hardly get their husbands to do anything else but to tune into Politics 101. I want to thank all of you, and I want to, again, a big shout out to all of you in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, tri-state area, and to say how heartening it is to visit these places and to have our people be so engaged with what's happening at home, and in some regards, much more engaged, much more tuned in to what is happening in Guyana. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. I plan to go back to Washington, D.C., Maryland area, probably to hold a town hall meeting sometime before the end of the year. I made that promise, and I will try as much as possible to keep that promise. And so again, thank you all so much, and those of you who are doing good work in the community, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. it's always been an area where Guyanese and Caribbean people organize, always doing something for the community. Thank you all so much. Welcome to this evening edition of Politics 101. Normally we would have WPA groundings this evening, but this evening we are not going to have our edition of WPA groundings. We're going to talk a little bit this evening about what I call a clear and present danger. A clear and present danger. It is amazing that, of course, on the weekend in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, people seized the opportunity, some of them, to talk with me quietly, individually, about their feelings about what's happening in our country. And every one of them mentioned the whole question of racial discrimination as being what they see as the most damaging thing today in our country. And I tend to agree with them. Our country has a lot of ills, a lot of problems, bad governance, because there is a bad government. And all the other things that come with bad governance. We have the problem of oil and the management of the oil industry. We have the problem of the environment and trying to protect the environment against the big oil and the industry that it spawns. We have the problem of freedom of speech, the attack by the government and freedom of speech. We have the question of the courts and the way in which the government has been hollering at the courts in recent times because rulings emanating from our courts have not been in favor of the government and they've been carrying on. We have the problem of the economy, the cost of living. We have the fastest growing economy in the world. There's no doubt about that. But in the fast growing economy of the world, we have almost 50% of our people living in poverty, living below the poverty line. We have unemployment running between 35 and 45, some may say up to 50%. Runaway inflation, prices in the market are skyrocketing. The economy, although it is doing good at the macro level, certainly at the level of the people, it is not being translated into any form of development as far as the people are concerned. And so, yes, we have all these problems in our country, We have the problem of violence. Every day you pick up the paper. Just this morning, I've been reading the newspapers, and I'm so saddened by all the violence, domestic violence, violence on the streets, out of control. The fastest growing economy in the world, but one of the most violent places in our Caribbean, in our hemisphere. The contradictions between the coming of oil wealth and the quality of life of our people, the blackouts, the dooms are there in our country. The fastest growing economy in the world, but a country of dooms. A country of dooms. And our people understand it. And people are asking, how are we going to solve these problems? What are we going to do? Management of our country has to be important. important. We cry out for a government, a form of governance that is able to lift our people out of the mess that we have found in ourselves in. We have always been in mess. It's the lot, if you will, of post-plantation societies. But in the midst of plenty, in the midst of actual plenty and potential plenty, one hoped, one continues to hope that we would do better. We would do better. And people ask, where is the better? We continue to live as enemies in our own country. If you speak out against the government, your lives are being threatened. Where is the love to be found? Asked Brother Marley, Brother Bob. Where is the love to be found? I've not known any happiness. I've known no sweet caress. Where is the love to be found? And we Guyanese continue to ask that question, where is the love to be found? But in the midst of all the doom, I think that there is one thing that is so dangerous that if we don't solve it, we can fix the environment, we can fix the economy. We may be able to fix some other things, but if we don't fix the question, if we don't fix the problem of racial discrimination, we will not be able to enjoy the other things. Racial discrimination is rampant in Guyana. We are a racially divided society, ethno-racially divided society. It's the accident of history. We were thrown into this country in different circumstances, horrible circumstances. We were thrown together in this land, first under the heinous system of slavery, the worst system of the accumulation of wealth that the human society has known. Africans were brought there in chains, against their will, and work here for 2.5 centuries without pay, without compensation. And in the process of slavery, the social, economic, and political relations were spawned. Hostile relations. And then our brothers and sisters were brought here at the end of slavery. Formal slavery came to an end. But colonialism did not end. And our brothers and sisters from Madeira and from India, from China, and they came together in this hostile post-slavery society. And the objective of that society continued to be the accumulation of wealth for Europeans and for European development. Slavery had gone, but indentureship had brought new peoples, but the old social and political relations continued. Wherever you put people against their will and you put them in competition with each other, they develop hostile relations. Sometimes they come together to struggle and to fight against the common enemy as they did. but always looking across at each other, competing for scarce resources. The motto and the practice of divide and rule were used as part of the organization of the society. What the UC Quayana called the meeting and parting their times that our people met and fought against the common colonial regime. And other times we parted as we struggled against each other for some little liberated space. Africans as they were, who had borne the brunt of the lashes of the colonial masters during slavery. They were constructed in the popular consciousness as being the worst of the lot. Those who were born to be slaves and who after formal slavery came to an end were deemed not to be capable of existing in a state of freedom. We develop stereotypes about each other. Stereotypes. The lazy African, the thrifty Indian. We develop stereotypes about each other. But all the time, running away, far away from the scourge of blackness, because blackness meant slavery. Blackness meant the bottom. Blackness meant the most inhuman. Anti-black racism is an inevitable offshoot of our social relations from the Middle Passage to the present. No one can deny that. And those who try to deny it are doing our country a great disservice. We crossed the border. We crossed the border in 1966, and we became an independent nation. An independent nation. Independent in the sense that we've thrown off the yoke, we threw off the yoke of colonial rule. And we are now going to be ruled by natives. Natives. The question of who governs? When the colonialists leave, who governs? Where we had a common approach against colonialism, that common approach began to unravel as we inevitably, invariably competed against each other for the new independent state. We fought in the early 60s, bitter, vicious, violent battle. And we fought over who would govern the independent state. And we came into independence with blood on our faces. And we have not recovered since. And the struggle continued to be who would govern, which group will govern. Which group will govern? We have had our issues. We have had our problems as we organize along ethno-racial lines in our political parties, in our communities. In our political parties and our communities. In some cases, we see the ethnic struggle as the inevitable struggle. And over time, people who had not been historical enemies, historical competitors, but not historical enemies. But over time, since independence, we have become more and more like historical enemies. We begin to construct our social relations, our political relations as if we were historical enemies. Africans did not enslave Indians. Indians did not enslave Africans. None of us enslaved the Amerindians, and they didn't enslave the Chinese and Portuguese. We are not historical enemies. But as we compete for control of the state, for control of the meager economic resources, for control of the levers of power, we have begun to act like historical enemies. Each group for its own, each group for its own. We pay lip service to racial unity. We pay lip service to racial unity. We call ourselves one Guyana, one people, one nation, one destiny, all those slogans. But at best, they're aspirations. As at worst, they're masks. Our people are divided. Africans do not want to be governed by Indians, and Indians do not want to be governed by Africans. That is a fact. We have demonstrated that every time we have gone to elections and beyond. Our elections have not been fonts of democratic practice. Our elections have not been examples of democratic practice. We fool ourselves. Our elections at best have been racial censuses. The votes for the PNC become a count of how many Africans there are in the electorate. The vote for the PPP, the same, how many people there are in the Indian electorate. We talk glibly about democracy. What is democracy if the people, the ethnic groups of the country do not feel a sense of togetherness, do not feel a sense of equal access to the resources of the country and the state? We fool ourselves. Today in our Guyana, we have found oil, and the wealth that flows from the oil raises anew the question of the equitable distribution of resources. The equitable distribution of resources. And since 2020, when our election became a medium, not for democratic arrangements, it became a medium for who would control the oil wealth. Local forces and foreign forces came together and determined the outcome of an election. And the winner was the party of one ethnic group, the winner that was installed. And the loser that was installed, the opposition as they called it, was the party of the other ethnic group. And in this fight for our lives, the winner has decided that domination, ultimate domination of the other, is the way to go. And so we face today in our country an anti-Black racism that sees the rulers, the representatives of Indian Guyanese, using the state as a way of dominating. And if you dominate, you have to control the other. And so, as it has always been, racism has become a ready tool in the service of the organization of the state. It was so during slavery. Racism arose out of slavery. It became a tool to subjugate the African. Racism continued to be a tool after slavery to subjugate the Black and the brown. And so today, as we seek to do what the slave masters did, that is to extract all the wealth from the country for one group at the expense of other groups. So it was during indentureship. So it is today. Racism becomes an easy tool, a ready tool to organize the society. Look around. 80% of the contracts, government contracts, goes to East Indians. 10% goes to Africans. East Indians make up almost 40% of the population, according to the last census. Africans make up 30%. And if you add the mixed people who, for the most part, have called themselves Africans, it would mean that the African population would go up from 30% to 40-odd%. And 10% of the contracts. Opportunities for the generation of wealth are so skewed racially. So skewed racially. You look at the way the government is being governed by handouts. We know that that is not economically sustainable. But for the past 3 years, they've been governing by handouts, not economic policy. And if you look at where the handouts are going, the majority of the handouts are going to one ethnic group. We know the numbers. We know the figures. We know the data. So the most dangerous thing that is happening in Guyana today is racial discrimination, especially racial discrimination against Africans. Africans come into the equation at a disadvantage. the way in which the society has been organized since independence and even before independence, meant that Africans, unlike our sisters and brothers in the East Indian and Portuguese and Chinese communities, we have not been able to generate the kind of communal wealth or generational wealth to pass on. We have not been able to do that. We have not been able to pass on wealth because we have not been able to generate wealth. And so when the question of investment of capital comes in, Africans are at a disadvantage. And so what we have is a multiplying of underdevelopment, and the willful hand of the government. The willful hand of the government enforcing racial discrimination to its height. I want you all to listen to me this evening to what I'm saying. We have to confront racism and we have to defeat racism if we are going to be able to set Guyana onto the straight path. And some of us have been doing that. Some of us have been doing that. I've dedicated a large part of my activism to fighting racial discrimination. But in Guyana, we have a way of speaking in forked tongues. We have not been able to go for the jugular. We've not been able to squeeze racism as we should, because we are being hypocritical about it. We have to call a spade, and we have not been doing so. So many times when we talk about racism against African Guyanese, people say, David, you have to be careful not to offend Indians. And I ask them, and I ask myself, why must I compromise the fight against racism because I don't want to offend somebody? I do not believe that Indians oppose people like me because of our fight against racism. I do not believe that for one moment. I believe Indians oppose us because they think in the fight against racism, we are fighting against their government. I do not believe they oppose us because we fight against the scourge of racism. Indians have been the victims of anti-brown racism too. But people persist. We cannot address frontally anti-Black racism, anti-African racism in Guyana because we will offend Indians. I've been told that by friends, some former comrades who do not want to come near me. Because they feel that the struggle against racism in Guyana will be interpreted by Indians as anti-Indians, and perhaps they do interpret it as anti-Indian. We face that dilemma. I know sometimes I ask people to come on to Politics 101, and they make all kinds of excuses. But they don't want to become on because they don't want to be associated with race. This is not race, this is anti-racism. That's the campaign. And I want to say it tonight, that I see that the biggest danger to Guyana, and I continue to believe that it has to be tackled with all of our energies. And if I have to walk alone, I will walk alone. Why people believe Indian people are so stupid that they will be offended because an African is fighting against anti-African racism. They tell us, oh, some of you in the opposition are shooting yourself in the foot. Because every time you raise the question of racism against Africans, you're chasing away Indians. I do not believe it. If we chase away Indians, it is not because of our principled position against anti-Black racism. It is because they feel we're opposing their party. And so, sisters and brothers, if I have to stand alone on this question, I will stand alone. Political parties can't face the issue frontally because they frighten them by telling them about crossover votes. And so people are prepared to exchange the dignity of their own supporters for some crossover vote. Sisters and brothers, I want to make it lucidly clear. If I have to walk alone on this issue, I will walk alone. When the PPP goes into African villages, they do not go there to contest for votes. They go there to raid and to shame African people. First of all, the fact that they go into some communities and give them a little pittance, give them some little contracts, it is because of people like me. It is those of us who have rung the bell that Africans are getting nothing, that they take shame out of their faces and give a little pittance to Africans. And that is why I am confident that if we continue the fight against racism frontally, it will bring more consciousness and force the hand of the regime to be more equitable in the distribution of wealth. Yes, I know that the coalition did not do much for Black people as Black people. I'm being careful here, because they did some things for Black people, but not as Black people. They never tackle the issue, the particular issue of Black underdevelopment. Yes, they didn't do much for Black people as Black people. Yes, some Black people are jumping up behind the PPP because they're doing the little. They ought not to jump up behind the PPP. They ought to jump up behind people like us, because we are responsible for them getting the little they're getting. But we have to let them know that. I'm not in the business of calling them soup drinkers and all of that. They have to be told that the little they're getting is because of us. But when they don't see many of us talking to them as Black people, they feel that we are not fighting for them. Because we're always saying Black people are suffering, but some Indians are suffering too. Yes, Indian people are suffering. But Black sufferation is unique in Guyana. It has to be unique because of the unique experience. If I have to walk alone on this question of anti-Black racism and bringing equality to Black people, I will walk alone. I'm tired of people talking that we have to be multiracial. Multiracialism is important. It is the objective. It is the ideal. Nobody has to tell me that. I know that. But there can be no genuine multiracialism without genuine racial equality. Genuine racial equal distribution of the wealth in our country equally. Racially, sorry. How can you tell me about multiracialism as a means to an end? Multiracialism is an end. The means is that we have to have the racial groups feel a sense of security and equality. And then there can be multi. If one is up and one is down, that is no multi. We are mobilizing Africans to fight for equality. And when we win, everyone wins. When we walked out of the gates of slavery, we closed the gates of slavery for everyone. I would like Indians to join our struggle against anti-Black racism. But I understand if they don't want to join. I understand. I don't agree with them. Because sometimes you have to help your neighbor to help yourself. Between 2015, and 2020, I was critical of the coalition government for its shortcomings, not racial. The coalition government did not overtly discriminate against other ethnic groups. I think they have probably the best record when it comes to respect for racial groups, the different racial groups. Although it was an African government, it was not overtly anti-Indian. There may have been instances of anti-Indian discrimination, but it was not of the proportion that we have come to expect in Guyana. But I was critical of that government on the issue of governance. They made mistakes. And in real time, I opposed them. And you know what? My party, the party that I belong to, was part of that government. Although Junior Partners was part of that government. I voted for that government. I did some work for that government, and I eventually was kicked out because I was critical of that government. I wanted to set an example to Guyana, to say you can vote for a government, you can support that government, but you can hold that government accountable by being critical of it when it does bad things. That is the example I wanted to set. The vast majority of African people did not agree with me. I offended African people when I criticized their government. I offended them. Some of them are today saying to me, Dr. Hines, you were right then, and we listened to you. Things might have been different. At the Chronicle, I would write a column critical of the government on a Sunday, and I would write an editorial in that same Chronicle praising the government, doing my two tasks on the same day. I have a clean heart and a clean conscience when it comes to the way I believe I behaved when Black people had power. I offended Black people. Many of them were angry with me. Some in my own party disagreed with my criticisms. I offended Africans. And today we have an Indian government doing worse than the coalition government. And people are telling me, David, don't talk about it because you're going to chase away Indians from your party. You're going to offend Indians. You're going to chase away Indians from voting for the no opposition. My God, I offended Africans for 5 years. And today, when I oppose an Indian government, they're telling me, don't do it because you're offending Indians. Where were they when I was offending Africans between 2015 and 2020? Guyana, sometimes it's a stink place. Stink in terms of the way we see our politics. I have little respect for people who do that nastiness. Today I am offending Indians and they're angry with me. Some of them, Indians are angry with me. But they love me between 2015 and 2020 when I was offending Africans. I am prepared to stand alone as I did between 2015 and 2020. I stand alone. And I'm prepared to stand alone today. I'm not prepared to fight all battles unnecessarily. Some people are telling me I have to be very careful about the PNC. I want a strong PNC because a weak PNC opens the door for battering Black people. I don't want a strong PNC because I love the PNC. I don't belong to the PNC. I never belonged to it. I opposed it I went to jail fighting against it. But in 2023, I make no excuse for wanting a strong PNC, because a strong PNC becomes a bulwark against the battering of Africans as Africans, against the anti-Black racism. A strong PNC potentially holds the hand of the racist government, or the racist hand of the government. I stand alone if I have to stand alone. My fight is not against the PNC in 2023. At some point, I will have to turn to the PNC and address them, but not today. Today, the clear and present danger is the PPP government that intends to sink African people to second-class citizenry, and Guyana cannot survive as a viable nation if Black people are second-class citizens. I fight for Black people today so that Guyana can live tomorrow. I offended Africans between 2015 and 2020. I offended Africans when I fought against Burnhamism. Oh yes, I know the story that under Burnham they rigged elections. I know that. Under Burnham they assassinated. I know that. But I've lived to see a Guyana where under the PPP they have assassinated too. Not because they've not assassinated a Walter Rodney means they've not assassinated. Crummy Wing was assassinated under the Ramotar government. We don't say Ramotar killed Crummy Wing. Rodney was assassinated under Burnham. We say Burnham killed Rodney. But we never say Ramotar killed Crummy Wing, or Jack Dio killed Ronald Waddle, or Ramotar killed the 3 men at Linden. We don't say that. We have different language for different groups. We are such hypocrites. Yes, I know Burnham terrorized the WPA. Yes, I know the PPP terrorized the WPA, put Ogunze in the chains of slavery. Chains and chained his leg like a slave. Don't tell me about Burnham and Rodney as a means of turning my head away from the torturing of our people, torturing them economically and politically and otherwise. Don't tell me about what Rodney would have done and what Rodney would have this and what Rodney would have done. I don't know what Rodney would have done. I know what I am doing today. Because I know what I'm experiencing today. I come into my own country and a regular immigration officer doesn't check me in. They have to ask permission from somebody to say clear before David Hines can enter his own country. And you tell me about Burnham? I'm not free to enter my own country. I'm treated like a fugitive. entering my own country. If I have to walk alone and stand alone on this issue of what is happening to African people, I am prepared to do that. I offended Africans when I fought Burnham. I offended Africans when I criticized the Granger regime. And people are telling me today I should not offend Indians. And so I must not fight against anti-Black racism because I will offend Indians. I love Indians as I love Black people and brown people and Portuguese people and Amerindian people because I love humanity. But I love humanity does not mean that I will stand for inhumanity, because I love humanity, but I hate inhumanity. I'm prepared to stand alone on these issues. If foes or friends want to stay far from me because of my activism, they don't want to come on shows that I am on, they don't want me to write in their newspapers, so be it. I will not still my voice, for I have too much to claim, to quote Martin Carter. Don't tell me about what the PNC did and what the PNC didn't do. A weak PNC as it is today means that the door is open for people to do all kinds of things to Black people in the name of some democracy and all that nonsense. And we stand aside and do nothing about it. Do not raise our voices. We are hypocrites, some of us. And I'm not prepared to be a hypocrite when it comes to the dignity of Black people. I come from the seed of the Black man, the African. Hear me out tonight, people. Hear me out. I'm prepared to walk alone. I understand the limitations of political parties. I belong to one. And the one that I belong to may be a little different from others, but it suffers from the same ills as others. There's sometimes we don't stand erect. We display no backbone. And we make those who attempt to stand erect, we make them scapegoats. I do not expect political parties to deal straight with the issue of race and racial discrimination because they're always looking for votes. But there comes a time when you have to say, wait, Mr. Vote, wait. You know, the Black Stallions said, they tell me that they want a calypso with smut about Jean and Dorothy winding up. But I tell them, until Mr. Divider divide the bread equally, wait, Dorothy, wait. And I'm saying here tonight, until they set this racial question straight, where Black people can get as much as Indian and Amerindian people and Chinese people, wait, Mr. Vote, wait. Priority must be priority. I'm tired of seeing black people. You go into a community, you give them a $2 million contract, and you line them up and shame them. Shame them among their people. Open them for the people to call them house slaves and slave catchers. You shame them. And you call that development. Yes, some of them are following you with your nonsense that don't make it right. That don't make it right. Some of them are putting on your stinking red jersey that don't make it right. It's wrong, it's wrong, it's morally wrong, it's politically wrong. And when all Guyana can say it's wrong, regardless of whether you're Indian or Chinese and Portuguese, you don't do that to great and honorable and noble people. Give them your $2 million that you didn't want to give them, that I made you give them. And then I say I don't mean just David Hines, I mean those of us who struggle. We made you give them. And then you put on red jerseys on them, line them up and shame them. And you call yourself honorable. And then the rest of you all in civil society and the political parties are afraid to tell you that you're a dirty little party, using and shaming a people of worth and dignity. If they don't want to tell you, I'm going to tell you. And if they don't want me in their midst because I'm telling you, I'm prepared not to be there. Stand alone. I'm prepared to stand alone. I'm prepared to stand alone. If you all want to kill Aubrey Norton and fight your battle with him, that's your business. I'm not into that. I'm sure Aubrey Norton has his shortcomings, but I hold him up because I think he's a potential and actual barricade against the battering of our people. I don't have to agree with him politically on everything. I probably disagree with Aubrey Norton more politically than I agree with him. But I'm prepared to hold him up as a barricade against the onslaught of African people. I'm prepared to walk alone and stand alone on these issues. At some point, we'll have to address Comrade Norton. At some point. But today, we have to hold Comrade Norton up as a barricade. When they shot Brother Bob Marley, he said, I have so much things to say. So much things to say. And tonight, I'm clear in my mind. If Indian people feel I'm offending them, at some point we'll talk about that. If Indian people don't want me around them, that's fine. At some point we'll talk about that. If respectable Black people feel that I'm talking the right things, I'm doing the right things, but I have to be very careful that I don't offend Indians or chase away Indians, we're going to talk about the good old times. We're going to have a beer, and we're not going to talk about politics and race. I'm prepared to stand alone. I'm prepared to stand alone until the scourge of racism, racial discrimination, anti-Black racism, until it is wiped from our faces so that we can see clearly. The Guyana that we all desire, where people of all ethnic groups and all racial groups can live, finally, in peace. I don't want a contrived peace. Brother Peter Tosh said, I don't want no peace. All I want is equal rights and justice. I don't want a contrived peace. I don't want a make-believe peace. I don't want a theoretical peace. I want a peace that is grounded on equal rights and justice for Guyanese of all races. Classes matter. Gender matter. Region matter. Country and tongue matter. But in Guyana today, at this point in time, race matters most. We got to get race right. And if we get race right, we're going to be able to tackle the other ills in a better way. I am prepared to stand alone on this issue. I want to thank you all for hearing me out tonight. I want to say especially thanks to the people of Maryland and Virginia, Washington, D.C., who I spent time with this past weekend. As I said, I don't want to call names because I'll forget some. But I want to say to you all, I love you all. And I may offend some of you all tonight. But sometime in the future, you'll probably see the wisdom of what I'm saying tonight. I love you all. I love you all. Let us continue this fight. On some things you cannot negotiate. If we wipe racism from the face of Guyana, we are going to be able to get some other things right.